Hey, this is Kevin Wallace, and in this week's Pacific edition of Forerunners, the Surfline podcast, Charlotte Perry and I will start by discussing Surfline's ShredAtHome campaign and what we miss about surfing, along with quick digressions into Surfer's Ear, the recent mayhem at Malibu, and the fleeting magic of spring surf conditions in Orange County. Around the 16:30 mark, Charlotte will delve into the California weather pattern and how much precipitation we're seeing, and when we can expect that rain and mountain snow to end. A bit after the 20-minute mark, we examine Major Cyclone Harold and some of the impacts it's likely going to have on Fiji. And then right around the 29-minute mark, we'll close with a sneak peek of some upcoming forecast-related stories on Surfline in the next couple weeks. Shameless plug now, if you're not already a premium member and would like to give us a try, which we would greatly appreciate, go to surfline.com/Forerunners podcast for a free 15-day trial of Surfline Premium. Here we go.
Okay, this is Sean Collins, Chief Forecaster of Surfline, and this is, the first order of business looking down on the Southern Hemisphere, what to expect over the next 2 weeks.
At any given moment, a perfect wave is breaking somewhere on this earth. For the surfer, the trick has always been knowing where and when to find it.
We are joined now by lead forecaster Charlotte Perry. You can follow him at SPerry Surfline on both Instagram and Twitter. He is, like I said, our lead forecaster. He's also our primary Southern California forecaster, and he is more often than not my partner in crime on this podcast. To start off this podcast this week, we just wanted to let you guys know about a campaign that we started at Surfline. It's the ShredAtHome campaign. You may have seen it on social media. We do have a lot of messaging on the site now that just started on Friday, so it's still relatively new. We launched this campaign and in an effort to encourage our users to strongly consider staying at home during the next few weeks until organizations like the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, etc., advise us that social distancing restrictions can be lifted. This is going to alleviate the risk on contracting or passing the coronavirus. And I think, to me, just as important, it could help alleviate the pressure on some of our first responders if you were to get hurt if you were surfing. I think that it's particularly close to home to me because I am a former lifeguard and still have that, very much in my blood. I'm as passionate probably about life saving as I am about surf forecasting. So, we'd love to see you guys get creative with the ways you're keeping the surf stoke alive at home. And if you are so inclined, please use that ShredAtHome hashtag in your Instagram and Twitter posts. We'd love to see how everyone is keeping at least semi-sane. And saying all of that, please know that we are not trying to enforce beach closures or surfing bans, nor will we ever try to do so. ShredAtHome is a suggestion only. While we think it's prudent, I think it individually, I am following it. We think it's prudent as a company. We are never going to tell anybody that they have to stay at home. We do think it's best left up to each individual surfer to make that informed and socially responsible decision. So again, we would encourage you to shred at home over these next few weeks. We know it sucks, but try and get creative. There's some really cool things on Instagram and Twitter that are surf related and people really trying to keep the stoke alive that stokes me out for sure.
Some pretty extravagant things coming out of the ShredAtHome campaigns. Some people have a lot of time on their hands.
I think all of us have a lot of time on our hands right now.
It's debatable on that one.
Yeah. I guess if you're a parent and especially you're trying to do the homeschool thing while working, you probably have negative time on your hands. So, man, Charlotte. So as I'm kind of writing up notes for a podcast and thinking about the things that we want to talk about today, and a little bit later in the podcast, we will get into some not necessarily surf-related things, but some storm-related things, some of the more interesting storms in the Pacific this week, or the storms of interest, I should say, because one certainly isn't one that we are taking lightly, and that's severe tropical storm Harold, which is down near Fiji. And then we'll talk a little bit about this storm off of California over the last couple of days and what it looks like for the next couple of days. But as I was going through the process of preparing for this podcast, I really started to think, God, I miss surfing so much right now. I haven't been in the ocean for just about a month. And I think that's probably the longest I've been out of the ocean in coming up on 10 years. The last time I was out of the ocean for a longer period of time is when I was out for surfer's ear surgery. I think that
ears
was
drilled.
Yeah, I got the ears drilled, and I can't remember. I think that was either 2011 or maybe early 2012. So maybe it's been about 8 years. And I was out. I think I ended up being out for about 6 to 8 weeks because I had some gnarly surfer's ear. Basically, I was 100% occluded in the right ear and like 99 in the left. And so they even had to go old school on me and like do the incision behind my left ear and like open it up versus the little micro drill through the right. Anyway, I digress. So it's the longest I've been out of the water in quite a long time. I think probably many of us are in that boat. Whether it's because it's forced in some instances, you have places where surfing, unfortunately, is illegal. Whether that's Puerto Rico, Costa Rica right now, in the United States, it's in general, surfing isn't necessarily illegal. There's kind of some gray areas, but beaches are closed.
Some gray area, but there's certainly some areas where it's pretty well shut down. I mean, it's everything that was going on at Malibu last week with that good south swell running, and people were rolling the dice there, and kind of the response, whether it was kind of the sheriff and lifeguards that were right there, or just those clips making the rounds on social media was pretty wild.
Did you see the Marshall brothers? They documented it on their Instagram account, and so there was kind of the original post of that guy getting essentially arrested. They did a follow up where it's like they're splicing stuff from Jaws in like clips from Jaws, the movie Jaws from whatever 1976, into that dude getting pulled out. That's really, really good. So.
I'm actually gonna have to hunt that down and take a look.
You got to look it up, and as you're looking it up, we'll figure out the exact. It's like the Marshall Brothers account, and it was really quite good. But I was just thinking, I miss surfing so much right now. What do you miss the most about surfing right now?
Oh man, the whole kit and caboodle. Just getting in the water and getting a couple decent waves. I think just. Seeing a good corner come in and just lining it up and being pumped when you get into a good one. I think that would be just that, and just being in the ocean and not sitting at my house and feeling kind of exotic when I walk to the mailbox. It's you're saying been a month since you've been in the water. I'm probably in about the same boat, and we're less than 10 days out from kind of the due date for our second son, and would have really liked to have been getting a couple more waves in recently with all the surf. So I think just the ability to get in the water and get a couple waves is what I miss the most. And there's been a couple of decent little swells around here, and I love the really big shoulder seasons guy, whether that's the spring or the fall around here. Just because it has a tendency to be so walled, and even though the conditions maybe aren't the great, I actually really enjoy this time of year for surfing, because I like picking little windows, and I don't mind a little bit of lump on it because it kind of keeps some of the people out of the water, and you can usually track down a couple good corners around here this time of year. And we've had a couple of decent swells and some little combos running, and I think that would be what I definitely miss most right now. It's kind of one of my favorite times of the year. The South Pacific starts going again. You still have some wind swell running most of the time, so it's going to be peaky even if conditions aren't great. So that's oh man, I feel like this is my time to shine, and I'm just sitting inside, occasionally walking around the neighborhood or getting the Grom out for a drive so he goes to sleep and I can get some work done.
Yeah, it's funny that with the spring conditions that we get in Southern California, and in particular for us, Orange County, we do most of our surfing in probably the Newport Huntington zone because we both live very close by. Our office is in Huntington Beach, and I totally know what you mean about the conditions can be a little ugly. But if you've got that little combo, if there's just enough wind swell to break up those southern hemisphere lines, like it might look kind of ugly, especially if we get those gray mornings like we tend to do a lot this time of year. And it's like it kind of looks funky from the beach.
Oh, they write it off, and it's pretty fun. And there's not a ton of people out. It's it's definitely one of my kind of favorite little little windows of the year.
Yeah. So I was, man, I just I love going fast on a surfboard, even if it's like just
I
not
was
even
thinking that, but I didn't want to say that because I had a buddy in college, and we were just like, I just want to go fast. And we started calling him Speedy for years, and I just kept thinking about that. I was like, I just love getting a board up on plane. Like you get that first pump in and setting up a bottom turn, you're just like, yeah, I felt good.
Yeah. So there's this picture of Mick Fanning, and I was trying to dig it up, but before
Are
the
you comparing yourself
before
to Mick Fanning right now?
no, not at all. I went this picture this picture of Mick Fanning does inspire me.
Lightning.
Yeah, I'm more like I don't know what just something describe something slow, and that's what I am probably. Uh, but it's just like this. It's kind of a semi speed blur of him surfing like pretty sizable J Bay, like solidly overhead, and he's like highlining this section, and he just like crouched down, and you just look at him, and he's like, man, he is going a million miles an hour right now, and just think of that speed and him eyeing something down the line, and it's going to do a huge hack or whatever it's going to do. Like that to me is I do really miss that. And of course, like, I love to body surf too. That kind of springs from my time working as a lifeguard. We weren't allowed to surf on our breaks for just kind of liability reasons. So I body surf all the time on my breaks, and working in Newport and the peninsula, you get kind of a lot of shore breaks. So it's almost it's barrels all the time, almost if you're body surfing. So I just miss that too. Like going out for a body surf, getting like 30 barrels in like a 45-minute session,
Just
even if
living
it's
the
only like
dream.
waist high. Yeah, just this. But
Some barrels, some green rooms.
yeah, it's funny. I was like, part of me, like, I feel like we've been just busy, and there's been so much chaos going on, and kids at home, and trying to figure that all out. And part of it, the surf's been a little bit funky at times, especially here in North Orange County. And then there have been, then like all of a sudden, like these little windows will pop up in between these passing storms, and I'm
Oh
like,
man, there was on one of the earlier South Pacific swells we have, and there's like a little bit of southerly wind swell and some northwest swell running. We had a low moving through. Wind was onshore through the morning, and then went offshore for the afternoon. And man, some of the waves that went down, like there was a clip I've seen a couple of times. I think Keaton actually grabbed it like as it happened and like posted it in the Slack. And this was kind of like right when the whole work from home thing. I think it was the day that we got sent home from the office. And Joe Lonnie got the best wave I've seen at 56 in so long. It was like a perfect left barrel, not a drop of water out of place. And I have that burned into my head, just like, oh, look at like the windows that have happened. Like that hasn't been good across the board, but man, there have been a couple of just magic little windows around the last couple of weeks.
yeah. And those are always the best ones to score too, where it's kind of, they just come together and they're quick, and they can be tough to forecast, and or especially like tough to communicate within a forecast. So it's, if it's like crappy all day and then there's this 2-hour window, it's unless people are really reading what we're writing, and some of you do, so thank you for that. But outside of that, it can be
that.
Yeah. It's the three of you that do that, we appreciate it. It's you can score those little windows, and they always tend to be pretty sweet. So
that's kind of a little bit of like magic in it too. It's like it goes from bad to perfect, and that always just feels a little bit more special than when you wake up and it's perfect.
Yeah, so we had that day. It's been just about a year. I think it was in like late April or May of last year, where we had a day like that, where it had been onshore all day, and then that thunderstorm made it down to the coast, and the wind went offshore on HB. We actually did a good epic, and we featured Keaton's photo. Keaton Browning, who's one of the other forecasters at Surfline. We featured his photo.
He got that good epic photo. I kind of thinks he's Maya Klein now.
Just gone to his head. Oh man. Well, I think safe to say we all miss surfing. I certainly wouldn't blame someone for going out, especially if you're in a just a tough place and you need to get in the water, and you need to just have that time to relax and reset. And we understand it. If you can get beyond that, you can ShredAtHome. We think it's a great idea. Overall, just do your best, make good decisions, try and make the most socially responsible decisions. But hey, we all have to take care of ourselves too, and make sure that we're mentally in a good place. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most we can ask for, and that's the best we can do. All right, so pivoting just a little bit, we wanted to talk about a couple of different storms, storms of interest, things that we've been watching as a forecast team. And first of all, we're going to start with the storm, or kind of series of lows that are impacting the California coast right now. It's not doing much for surf in general. Like, kind of most of our surf is coming from southern hemisphere storms of late, but a little bit out there. But really, it's impacting our weather, and we're getting pretty decent rain totals, and really decent to significant mountain snow totals, especially considering the time of year. So what do you see in Charlotte, and what can we expect the next few days?
Yeah, it's been interesting. We've had this pattern along the West Coast where we've seen these really just great looking storms on satellite dropping south just along the West Coast. But the way that they've been setting up, they haven't been especially strong in terms of winds, although they've been driving a lot of kind of rain, mountain stuff, precipitation over the last couple of weeks. We haven't seen these kind of prolific, shorter period northwest swell mix makers that you expect when you see some of the satellite imagery of these storms. Mm-hmm. But like you were saying, the rain totals and the snow in the Sierras, I think Mammoth is up over 4 feet now on this storm. There are a couple of the local mountain areas in Southern California are over 4 to 5 inches of rain, with a couple of high elevation areas seeing up to a foot of snow. So really impressive. Most of the coastal areas are anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches in a few localized zones. But a good bit of rain for us when you consider that a lot of the coastal areas don't see more than 12 to 15 inches of rain in a year. So pretty good chunk of rain. As we move through the next couple of days, it looks like, especially tonight into tomorrow, so into Wednesday, especially for Southern California, we're going to see another little shot of moisture move in, because we have this large scale pattern with an upper level low that's basically centered just offshore of Southern California and pushing a couple of individual disturbances through the region. So we got more rain coming, quite a bit of rain here in Costa Mesa the last couple of days. Really started on Monday, and a few decent showers so far this morning. But as we move through the next couple of days, can continue to see a little bit more precipitation for Southern California mainly, a little bit of snow up in the southern reaches of the Sierras. And then we'll see a more typical pattern for this time of year. We'll see more high pressure in the longer range. So it looks like we'll dry out a little bit as we move through the weekend into next week. So definitely an interesting time. And obviously, we have these southern hemisphere swells we've had running. There's been some northwest swell. So a couple of windows for waves around here, but also it's been pretty crazy to see the amount of snow in the Sierras, and the fact that, all the resorts are shut down at this point. And it's really kind of people, first responders, a lot of the people in the mountain communities are obviously advising against kind of going into the backcountry areas, but it's wild to, take a look at the cameras around there and just see all of the snow that is just completely untouched, because it's
the skiers and snowboarders are shaking a stick at us right now. It's like the equivalent of us talking about the surf going off, pretty much. But it's we understand your pain. Shaul and I are both pretty avid snowboarders, and I would say almost as frothy about snowboarding as we are surfing. And I unfortunately had my generally speaking, I get the majority of my days in kind of March, April, and even get some great days into May over the last few years, and have less of an opportunity for a number of different reasons to get kind of earlier season, November to January riding. So I didn't get any days of riding in this year, and looks unlikely that I will get any, which is too bad. I'd love to be riding neck deep POW about right now too.
Yeah, 48 inches is nothing to shake a stick at.
It's overhead on the Grom.
Dude, he would be so pumped to just get thrown into 48 inches of snow right now. He loved it.
Just soft, fluffy stuff just disappears. Oh, that's classic.
So what's going on so we're talking California.
Mhm.
And you're going to walk us through what's going on around Fiji right now. So the Southwest Pacific tropics have just been going crazy so far this season. It's been so active down there, and this is kind of really the fever pitch of the early season activity down there.
Yeah, unfortunately, this will be a bit more on a somber note because we do have a very strong storm, severe tropical cyclone Harold, which is impacting Fiji now and will continue to do so, over the next kind of 12 to 24 hours. It looks like whether or not the eye actually makes landfall is to be seen. But regardless if there's kind of official landfall or not. Does look like it's going to be, unfortunately, a very destructive storm for Fiji, particularly Viti Levu, the Fiji's main island, and the kind of the western part of the chain, which includes a couple places that I think are very near and dear to many surfers' hearts, and that's Tavarua and Namotu Islands, both small, low-lying islands on the west side of Viti Levu. So at this point, Harold is a strong Category 3 cyclone on the Saffir-Simpson scale with 110 knot sustained winds. Some of the local scales actually have it as a Category 4, but the important number would be the 110 knot sustained winds. If there's a good thing about this particular storm, it is moving rather quickly. Moving to the east-southeast at about 15 knots right now. It looks like that may even speed up a bit more over the next several hours to 1 to 2 days. So that's good in the sense that it's going to be tracking by, Fiji, meaning Tavarua, Namotu, all the other small islands of Viti Levu pretty quickly. That's, if you compare that, say, to like a Dorian in the Bahamas last year, which
just part
to me. Yeah, which I just cannot imagine. I can barely imagine what a cyclone like Harold might do. But you look at something like Dorian, which essentially parked itself as a Category 5 storm over the Bahamas for like 24 hours or maybe a little bit more. It's just unimaginable to me. Hurricane Harvey in the Houston, Texas area, I think that was like August 2017, did something similar where
basically stalled out.
Just
got trapped between a couple areas of
rain,
high pressure and was just hanging out there. I think looking at some of the specs, I haven't been nearly as in tune with Harold, but it's not a small system by any means.
No,
looking at the quadrant analysis, breaking down kind of the radii of storm and cyclone force winds, and you just say it's got pretty good size.
Yeah, typically, we're examining these things very closely for surf more often than not. Looking at surf, especially for the U.S. East Coast and the U.S. West Coast. But what we have done, and I learned this from Sean, and we've talked about this as a forecast team, is you look at the radius of 34 knot winds, and basically, for all intents and purposes, the radius of tropical storm winds are very close to it. And we kind of have, and depending on what we see, the distance covered, the area covered by those tropical storm force winds, you kind of have an idea of small, medium, large, even extra large system. And with this particular storm, I would put it in the large category. On that northern quadrant, which is kind of the quadrant that's aiming most of the seas and swell and wind towards Tavarua, towards Namotu. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 miles across, which that's large.
Just the northeast quadrant. Looking at the analysis from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, and 175 nautical miles in the northeast quadrant, which is that's substantial.
Yeah, if I'm thinking back to give this some a bit of reference to think back, say like a Hurricane Marie. I want to say, and with Marie, we're looking at the eastern quadrant of the storm for the system to send surf to Southern California. Obviously, we're not worried about the surf for Fiji right now. We are much more concerned with the protection of life and property and the well-being of everybody there. But these are just things that we are looking at, aware of, and kind of determine what's the breadth, what's the width of the storm, and how the areas that it could impact. A lot of times people will focus on where that eye is and where it might make landfall. But the reality is you can have pretty severe impacts hundreds of miles away from where that eye may or may not make landfall. So just to give a little reference, I wanted to say Marie on the eastern quadrant was like in the 400 mile range, 450, something like that. And I need to go back. I should have looked at that beforehand, but we would consider a storm
if we did like full cross section, I think you might be in that ballpark. I think in terms of the radius of say 34 knot wind, it would have been between like 180 and 200 in kind of a given quadrant. But I think I think you between 300 and 400 would be reasonable for the eastern half of the system.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. So the kind of the entire eastern half versus quadrant.
Yeah. So it's in terms of size, this system is certainly not far off, which is pretty staggering when you.
Yeah. So that was a long-winded way for Charlotte and I to say the system's pretty big.
Yeah.
Basically. So,
indeed.
Yeah. So the other, you'd mentioned that we really have an active season in the Southwest Pacific. This is actually, looks like it'll be the third impact of a tropical cyclone this season on the Fijian Islands. You had Cyclone Sarai at the very end of 2019, kind of right around New Year's, caused, unfortunately, fairly extensive damage. I think 2 lives were lost. We also had Tropical Cyclone Tino in mid-January, and that affected Fiji's eastern island, so kind of on the other side, opposite side of where Tabarua and Namotu were, and also caused pretty extensive damage. So this looks like it's going to be the third in the season, unfortunately. And then just looking a little bit further ahead, there are some impacts that look increasingly likely for Tonga on Thursday local time. So if you just happen to be listening to this podcast, you're in that zone, please do follow the Tonga Meteorological Service for the latest updates on the protection of life and property. And we wish nothing but the best for anyone that's riding the storm out. To our friends on Tabarua Island. I've had the good fortune to go down a few times, whether for vacation or for to be there for events and doing forecasting for events. I've gotten to know a lot of the people that live and work on the island or live close by and work on Tabarua. And the Fijians are just second to none in terms of their warmth and hospitality. And thinking of you guys and hoping nothing but the best, and hoping you get through this safely. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I think we'll probably wrap this pod up, Shaw. Oh no, Shaw, we have one more thing to discuss, don't we? We've got some couple of cool articles coming up on the site here over the next few days. We've obviously shifted from some of our focus from the forecast editorial standpoint. Before, if there was a good looking swell coming up, we were not only were we mentioning it in the forecast, but we often would do a story on the site, especially if it was a significant swell. That's probably tone deaf right now, or would be tone deaf to do right now. So we pulled back quite a bit on that. But our forecast team is still able to offer a lot of things that may be kind of evergreens that you can always check out. Hopefully things that will teach you about a few forecast related, whether they're tools or tricks or tips or whatever they happen to be, or just kind of some fun things to geek out on as we hang at home. So Charles, I'll let you take away what we've got coming up here in the next couple weeks.
So taking a bit of that kind of additional time that we would be, like you said, taking the ability to ramp up when we have very interesting swell events or a very active run in the South Pacific and a good bit of surf on the way, like we've seen for a lot of places in Southern California recently. Actually taking a look at some of our archives and kind of pulling out we're going to have a couple of interesting features looking at the top 5 Southern Hemisphere swells over the last 20 years. So going back through our data archive and looking at the buoy data and really pulling out those specific South Pac swells that were pretty impressive over the last 20 years. And then also We'll be doing the same thing with tropical swells. No surprise there that Marie is number one on the tropical swell list. It's actually our biggest southerly swell over the last 20 years. So be
and what we figured we I think a couple pods ago we were talking about the buoy output for that, and then our
US
Kibby's
Open
corner
swell?
guy Matt Kibby. What did it end up being? It was 8 to 9 feet at 14 seconds or something like that on a couple of the buoys.
I think it was 9 at 15.
That's a big swell.
And then the US Open swell was 6 at 17.
Yeah.
So, spoiler alert, US Open swell is not the number one swell of the last 20 years. It is in the middle of the pack. So, a couple of other that have actually come in larger. Really cool to look back over all of the purple blobs and the kind of resulting buoy observations of those major events. Pretty cool. So, we'll be compiling all of that. Also be breaking down what drives Catalina eddies. And
very, very, very pertinent for this time of year.
Oh yeah, we're coming into the season, talking about what drives those eddies and kind of what leads to the windows to score. Kind of this time of year, you have the southerly winds and then the westerly winds in the afternoon. You have a couple of windows when those competing forces are kind of at a stalemate. And we're breaking that down for you.
I like that. At a stalemate.
Stalemate.
Big. I gotta work that into my everyday vernacular.
Oh boy, just living the dream over here in my kitchen. And then we got a tropical outlook for the Atlantic and Pacific basins that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to working on some of that. Look forward to reading some of that. And now, after a little bit prematurely ending the podcast, I think we will cut it off now.
We'll call it now for good.
We're calling it, yeah. Schaller, good to talk to you as always. To everyone out there, we encourage you to shred at home. Just overall, be safe, be responsible, be good to each other, and we'll talk with you next week.
All righty, have a good one.
That's about it for now. Thanks again for listening to Forerunners, the Surfline podcast. The next Pacific episode is going to be available by Tuesday evening, April 14th, and the next Atlantic episode will be available tomorrow evening, April 8th. And again, if you're not already a premium member, go to surfline.com/Forerunners podcast to get a free 15-day trial, as we would appreciate your business. Be safe, be good to each other, and we'll talk again next week.